Hey guys, this is Eliza and welcome back to a new video. So today I'll be wrapping up August. Now in August I read a total of 27 books, which is insane considering the last week of the month basically I read nothing hardly because I was the main organizer for a car and bike show that happened on Saturday just gone. So the last Saturday of the month. So I was a little bit hectic that last week getting shit organized last minute for that, so I didn't get a chance to read a ton that last week, but I still read 27 books, so I'm super happy with that. I did participate in NEWTs and beat the bingo in the month of August as well, so I'm gonna briefly mention what books I read for those challenges, but I'm not going to talk about the books too much because, again, there's 27 books. I got 2 month-long readathons to talk about and all the other books I read. So we're just going to jump into it, and I apologize now if this is a long video. So first off, I have my bullet journal. I won't be doing a wrap-up like I planned for my bullet journal, but here is what the month looks like, and I also have over onto the next page because I ended up filling this up. So that is what that looks like in case you're curious what it would look like when it's full. And there we go. So first I'm going to talk about the Beat the Bingo readathon. I'll put an image up here of what my bingo sheet looked like at the end. Actually, hold on. I can show you because it's in my bullet journal. So this is what it looked like by the end. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4 bingos altogether. So I didn't complete all the challenges, but I got a fair few and I'm happy with what I read. So let's just get into what challenges or what books I read for what challenges. So firstly we have reread a favourite, and for this one I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire by J.K. Rowling. Obviously Harry Potter is one of my favourite series, so I decided to read it. And this one is actually my second favourite of the books, so close enough, but I read that one for that challenge. So next we have read a book with a blue cover, and for this one I read Prodigy by Marie Lu, which has a blue bird thing on the cover. This one I listened to on audiobook and it was a little weird. I enjoyed it, but it was just, the romance drove me insane and it was just a bit underwhelming. So yeah, anyways, that's all I'm going to say about it. I read Prodigy for the blue on the cover challenge. So the next challenge was to listen to an audiobook, and for this one I read 1,000 Beginnings and Endings by Ellen O, which is an anthology. Well, it's edited by Ellen O. It is an anthology and I read this one on audiobook. I quite enjoyed it. I enjoyed most of the stories, whereas I feel like most anthologies I don't like a lot of the stories. So yeah, I think this is my favourite anthology that I've read so far. But yeah, I listened to that one on audiobook, so it counts for the challenge. The next challenge is to read a fantasy, and for this one I read The Wicked Plus Divine Volume 7, and this is an adult fantasy graphic novel, so it fits the challenge and I love the artwork. Super bright and interesting, and yeah, enjoying it so far. This is the 7th volume. I should be enjoying it by now, but yeah, I read this one for the Read a Fantasy. The next challenge is to read a book with a plant on the cover, and for this one I read I Am Changed by Susie Zale. This has some flowers around it. This one I read for a blog tour, which I will leave my review down below in case you are interested. It was really, really good. I think I rated it 5 stars and it was amazing. This is a YA contemporary set in, what's the town called? Well, it's set in Uganda, but I can't remember what the town's called. It doesn't say it on the back. But yeah, it's set in Uganda and it was really freaking good, really empowering. Highly recommend. The next challenge is to read a sci-fi, and for this one I read Legend by Marie Lu, which is the first book to Prodigy, which I spoke about earlier. Again, the romance was meh. I really don't care about the romance at all, and it was interesting enough. I'm not fully hooked, but it was good, so yeah. The next challenge was to read a graphic novel, and for this one I read The Woods Volume 1. This is a really interesting graphic novel so far. It's sci-fi, space, not even space travel. I'm not even sure what it is because we don't know yet, but there's monsters, and yeah, it's really interesting so far. I'm super keen to continue it, and yeah, I read this one for the graphic novel challenge. The next challenge was to read a book with multiple point of view, and for this one I read Shadow Frost by Coco Ma. This is a I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but this was an e-arc that I had through NetGalley, and it has multiple point of view, so I used it for this challenge and I really enjoyed it. I think I have reviewed that one. I'll link it down below as well. The next challenge was to read a book under 250 pages, and I read Misfit City Volume 1, which is another graphic novel. This one I am super interested in. Usually for biographic novel, I read the first volume, I'm like, oh yeah, that was interesting, I want to continue, whereas this one I'm like, I need to fucking continue. I need to know what happens next. So yeah, and there's only 2 volumes out as far as I know, which I'm annoyed about. I need to know more. So yeah. really good, highly recommend it, and it is under 250 pages, so it fits. The next challenge was to read a book with gold on the cover, and for this one I read Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand on audiobook. This has like a goldy yellowy colour on the cover. I enjoyed this one. It was really interesting, like really unique. I'm kind of getting in my mind it confused with Wilder Girls and Sawkill Girls because of the name. No relation whatsoever, but for, like, they're getting messed up in my brain slightly. I'm reading Wilder Girls right now, but anyways, but yeah, I enjoyed it. The next challenge was to read the group book, which was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho. My copy, I'm not sure where it is, so you're just getting a picture on the screen. But yeah, this one I didn't love. There was just, I need to review it still. I might do it before this video goes up. If I do, I'll link it down below. But there was just like so many things that just didn't really mesh with me. I didn't like the romance. I don't know. I just felt off for some reason. I didn't love it. So yeah, but I read it because it was the group book. And if you did happen to like Wicked Fox, we just released bookmarks, which are currently on sale for half off, so $2 for a bookmark. I'll leave the link down below in case you're curious. We've got Six of Crows, we've got Medoran Chronicles, we've got A Curse of Dark and Lonely, Stalking Jack the Ripper, heap of others, but yeah, I'll leave a link down below in case you're curious. And just self-promoing, you know the deal. Next challenge was to read a dystopian book, and for this one I read The Song Rising by Samantha Shannon. This is the third book to the Bone season, and I love this series so freaking much. These books are so good, and we just recently got I think it was the date for the fourth book in the series, and I'm so keen, like so freaking keen, because it has been so long since this book came out compared to when the next one is coming out, because she wrote Priory of the Orange Tree in between. So yeah, I'm super keen to continue. It took me ages to get to this one because I do read these really slowly, so it's like, even though it's not huge, it's like kind of intimidating. It's also, my book is bent. Can you see that? I don't know if you can tell. On the camera it looks bent. Yes, it is slightly. Oh well. But yeah, so I read The Song Rising for the Dystopian Challenge. The next challenge is to read a book set in the future, and for this one I read Paper Girls Volume 2, which is another graphic novel. I read this one on ebook, like through Scribed, and actually no, it wasn't through Scribed, it was through Comixology. But I am super curious. Like, this book just got, like, from volume 1 it was like a little bit crazy, like what the fuck is happening, to volume 2 being like fucking insane, what the hell is going on. So yeah, I'm intrigued. I want to continue, but yeah, it is set in, well, it's not necessarily set in the future, but it does have like time travel and they're like jumping ahead. So I'm counting it for this challenge. And moving on. The next challenge is to read a book with red on the cover, and for this one I read Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa on audiobook. This one was enjoyable enough. It kind of blended together a little bit with 1,000 Beginnings and Endings because I read them very close together and they both have very similar like feels. Like 1,000 Beginnings and Endings is an anthology, so all the books have different feels, but it just kind of blended in together. So I can't really remember much about this one. It just kind of like disappeared out of my head. I remember enjoying it, but I don't think it was a favorite. I didn't review it because I don't usually review audiobooks, but yeah, it kind of just blended in with the other one. And because I read like 3 books that were focused around like Asian style mythologies, it's all kind of like blending together. But anyway, so yeah, anyway, I read that one for the Red on the Cover challenge. The next challenge was to read a mystery book, and for this one I read Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie. This is the next book I was up to in the Hercule Poirot series. I'm not sure what number it is. I think it's like number 18 or something. But yeah, I've slowly been making my way through this series. It's a mystery series, obviously, if you've been living under a rock and don't know who Agatha Christie is. It's a mystery series. But yeah, so I read that one, really enjoyed it. I love Agatha Christie's Hercule Poirot series, so, but yeah, read that one for the mystery. The next challenge was to read an Own Voices book, and for this one I read Binti by, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, and I'm not even going to try because I'm going to butcher it. But this one I didn't love. Like, it was interesting enough, but there just wasn't enough of it. I was just like, oh, was that it? It's like a sci-fi type, I don't know if it was fantasy. It kind of felt like fantasy, but also like sci-fi, because sci-fi and fantasy kind of blend together. If you go into the sci-fi but add fantasy elements, you're like, is it really fantasy or is this just an alien? But anyways, so it kind of had that vibe. I didn't hate it, but it was really quick because it's only like 2 hours or something on audiobook, and yeah, it was quick, it was easy, left me a little bit underwhelmed. But yeah, it is Own Voices, so I'm using it for that challenge. The next challenge is to read a 2019 release, and for that one I read The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman, and I still need to review this one, but I actually really enjoyed this. This is super interesting. I loved the dark feel to it. I loved the fantasy elements and the magic elements and the monster, and it was like a mystery plus a fantasy, and it was like, what the hell is going on the whole time? And yeah, I ended up really enjoying it. I really need to sit down and review this and Wicked Fox, and wasn't there another one I said I didn't review? I don't know. But yeah, I need to sit down and do some reviews. But yeah, if I review this one before then, I'll link it down below. But yeah, really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend checking this one out. It is not what I was expecting at all. Like, I knew it was like dark and fantasy, but this was insane. So yeah, anyways, I really enjoyed this one, and I coloured the edges of mine purple because, I don't know, it's purple. The next challenge was to read a book over 300 pages, and for this one I listened to the audiobook of Dare You to Lie by Amber Lynn, I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name, and I actually really enjoyed this one. Like, as I think the sequel's out now, I need to go and get it because I was like hooked from like the very first like 10 minutes of this book, and I wanted to know what happened, and then it ended, and it was like a week out from when the sequel was coming out, and it wasn't inscribed obviously, but yeah, I was like hooked, and I read this in an entire day, and it is like a pretty chunky book, and well, sorry, I listened to it in an entire day, and it was a pretty long audiobook. So yeah, I love this one. I really enjoyed it. I need to go and pick up the second book actually. That reminded me. I need to go and suss that out and see if it's on Audible. The next challenge is to read a book with yellow on the cover, and for this one I actually listened to a non-fiction book, and I listened to It Is Not What It Looks Like by Molly Burke. If you don't know who Molly Burke is, she is a YouTuber, and she does like fashion videos and videos about her guide dog, and Gallop is gorgeous. He's a beautiful dog. She came out with an audiobook, I think at the start of this year. I can't really remember. I'm not usually into non-fiction, so I was a bit iffy about going into it, but I decided to grab It's Not What It Looks Like and also one of the Try Guys books. And yeah, I listened to It's Not What It Looks Like, and I really enjoyed it. It was definitely heartbreaking. I wouldn't recommend it if you're a bit sensitive to discussion of like suicide and depression and mental health in general basically, and also the death of an animal, as she does speak about the death of her first guide dog. So yeah, really enjoyed it, but yeah, just be careful going into it if you're sensitive to those topics. And yeah, I listened to it for the Read a Book with Yellow on the Cover challenge because I think there's yellow on the title or something, I can't remember. It'll be on the screen, you'll be able to see where the yellow is. Okay, last challenge for Beat the Bingo. This one was to read a middle grade book, and I read Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard. What's this book actually called? The Sword of Summer by Rick Riordan, which is the first book in the Magnus Chase and the Gods of Asgard series. This one is actually technically YA, but in my opinion, like, I went into it thinking it was middle grade, but in my opinion, this reads like middle grade, so I'm still counting it for this challenge, even though it's technically not middle grade. I didn't enjoy this book. I was just like, can we get this over with? I'm done. I'm underwhelmed. I'm bored. I feel like I'm reading the same thing over and over again. It is predictable. I just didn't care. So yeah, but I read that one for the middle grade challenge. Okay, so now moving on to NEWTs. If I've already showed the book cover, I will not be lifting it up and I will not be talking about it. I'll just tell you what I read for what challenge. So let's jump in. So I'm just going in order of alphabetical order on the subjects. So first we have the Exceeds Expectations Ancient Runes challenge, and for this one you had to read a book in past tense, and I read The Sword of Summer by Rick Riordan. I'm sorry if you can see me looking off my phone, but it's a lot of books to remember and a lot of subjects. So the next one was Arithmancy, the Acceptable Challenge, which was to read a book that ends on an even number, and for this one I read Misfit City Volume 1, which was the graphic novel that I really enjoyed. Then the Outstanding Challenge for Arithmancy was a book that's longer than 350 pages, and for this one I read Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. This one's around 420 I think it is, or 450. Can't remember exactly, but it is over 350 pages, so it counts for the Arithmancy Outstanding Challenge. And I didn't do the Exceeds Expectations Challenge, but it's fine because I didn't need these for my career. So next we have Astronomy, and for this one I only completed the Outstanding Challenge, which was to read a sci-fi book or a book with stars on the cover, and for this one I read The Wicked plus the Divine, Volume 7. Next on to Care of Magical Creatures, and this is one of the subjects I actually needed for my career, and I had to complete all 3 grades, so acceptable, exceeds expectation, and outstanding, to complete this one. So first off, the acceptable challenge was to read a book that starts with the letter A, and for this one I read Avatar, The Last Airbender, The Search, Part 1. That is a long ass name. So originally I was going to read Archangel 1 by Evan Curry, I think his name was, for this one, but I ended up DNFing it like very early. I'll leave my review down below because I actually explained why I didn't DNF this one. But yeah, I was going to read that one, but because I read so little of it before DNFing, I decided I needed to pick up something else. So I grabbed one of the Avatar graphic novels, and that was just the one I was up to. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, then they're really short, so you don't really get into it, but I feel like I'm curious and I want to continue. And I read that because it starts with A for Aragog and Avatar. So the next challenge, which is the Exceeds Expectations challenge, was to read a book under 300 pages, and for this one I read Heartstopper Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. I can't remember how many pages exactly this has because it actually continues on from Volume 1. So this starts at page 265 and ends at, I don't know what page because there's no page numbers back here, 556. So it is under 300 pages. I can't remember how many exactly. But yeah, I really enjoyed this series. It's just like something kind of cute to get away from everything else, which sometimes I need apparently. Even though I don't like romances, I enjoy this. There's something about Alice Oseman's, not her writing obviously because this is a graphic novel, but there's something about her writing and her stories that really grips me. And I enjoyed this one, and it's just really easy to read. There's only like a few words per page. It's really quick to get through. And yeah, I read it for that challenge. The outstanding challenge for Care of Magical Creatures was to read a book with a bird on the cover. And for this one, I read Prodigy by Marie Lu. It has like the blue bird on the cover, so it fitted. Next we have Charms, and for my career, I had to do the Acceptable and the Exceeds Expectation challenge for Charms, which I did. So the Acceptable challenge is to read a book that you think has a gorgeous cover. And for this one, I read Shadow Frost by Coco May, whatever her name is. Yeah, I really enjoyed this cover with all the swirls and the leaves and the sword, and it's just really nice cover, so I used it for this challenge. The Exceeds Expectations challenge was to read a comic, manga, graphic novel, whatever, and I ended up reading The Woods Volume 1 for that challenge, which I've already spoken about. I really enjoyed. So next we have Defense Against the Dark Arts, and for this one the acceptable challenge is to read a book with black under the dust jacket, and for this one I listened to the audiobook of Solitaire by Alice Oseman, and I ended up posting on Facebook and just saying to someone, hey, does this book have black under the dust jacket, because I don't actually own it, and they said it does, so I'm taking that person's word for it. I read it for this challenge, I listened to it on audiobook, and I really enjoyed it. I don't really enjoy it, I enjoyed it. Not as much as the first 2 books of Alice Oseman that I read. Obviously I read what's it called? Radio Silence and I Was Born for This. I really enjoyed both of those. Solitaire was like next one on my list, but it was like super curious, super interesting. I didn't like the romance, but the whole mysterious plot situation I really enjoyed. So yeah, the romance definitely let it down for me. Didn't enjoy it as much as the first 2, but it was enjoyable. The next challenge for Defense Against the Dark Arts is the Exceeds Expectations challenge, and for this one you have to read the first book that comes to your mind that's on your TBR, and when I wrote my TBR that was Wicked Fox by Kat Cho, which I had just received after when I read these challenges, so I used it for that challenge. And the outstanding challenge is to read a book that has an English author or is set in England, and I ended up reading Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I'm not going to get it down because it's like covered in Funko Pops, but I read this one. Obviously it is set in or near London somewhere, wherever Hogwarts School happens to be, that we don't really know. It's written by an English author and it's set in that area somewhere. So I used it for this challenge, and I did listen to this one on audiobook. The next subject was divination, and for acceptable you had to read a white book, and I read Legend by Marie Lu. It has like a whitish grey coloured cover, so I counted it for this challenge. Moving on to herbology, the acceptable challenge was to listen to an audiobook, and I listened to Saw Kill Girls by Claire Legrand, which I mentioned before, and yeah, I listened to that one audiobook, so it fitted. The Exceeds Expectations challenge for herbology was to read a book between 350 and 390 pages, and for this one I read The Song Rising by Samantha Shannon, and it is like 300, it's right at the bottom of that pile. Actually no, it's not, it's this one here. Hold on, I'll tell you how many pages it has. It technically has more pages than that, but the actual story is between that because there's like glossaries and maps and shit in the back. There is 350 exactly, so it's between 350 and 390 pages. Also, I didn't mention, for herbology, I had to complete the Acceptable and Exceeds Expectations challenge for my career. So I did that. Then we had the Outstanding Challenge, which was to read a book with flower on the cover, and I read I Am Change by Susie Zale, which I showed you before, it has flowers on the cover. Then for A History of Magic, the Acceptable Challenge was to read a fantasy, and I read 1,000 Beginnings and Endings, the anthology, which has fantasy in it as well as like some contemporary feel as well. The Outstanding Challenge for History of Magic was to reread a favourite, and I read Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the same challenge basically as for Beat the Bingo, reread a favourite. I used it for both. Then we have Muggle Studies. The Acceptable Challenge is to read a book with a cover that is an actual photo element, and I read Dare You to Lie by Amber Lynn. I'm not sure how to pronounce that last name, and it has the face of a like you can see it on the screen, but it's got a face on it, so it's a real element. The Exceeds Expectations Challenge was a book set in their real world, and I read It's Not What It Looks Like by Molly Burke, which is a non-fiction, so it's definitely set in our world. The Outstanding Challenge for Muggle Studies is to read a book written by a person of colour, and I read Binti. Again, I'm not going to try and pronounce that last name, but it is written by a person of colour. So then on to potions. The Exceeds Expectations Challenge was to read a book with the cover the same colour as your house colour. Mine is Gryffindor, and I read Dumb Witness by Agatha Christie, which is like a reddy maroon colour, and again, I've spoken about that one before. I really enjoyed it. Then we had Transfiguration. The Acceptable Challenge was to read a book that featured LGBTQIAP+ representation, and I read The Devouring Grey by Christine Lynn Herman. Then the Exceeds Expectations Challenge was to read a book that is not the first in a series, and I read The Woods Volume 2, which I don't have physically. I read this one on Scribed. Again, I really enjoyed The Woods, so I wanted to continue, and I did, and it is not the first in a series because it's the second volume, so it fits the challenge. And then the last challenge is the Outstanding Challenge for Transfiguration, and for that one you had to read a book that was over 500 pages, and I read Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix on audiobook. It's like 800 pages or something or other, so definitely over 500 pages, so it fits. Now, let me see if there is any book I read that I have not already spoken about. Okay, so at the start of August, I finished Murder in the Mews by Agatha Christie, which I had been reading at the end of July and continued on to August, so that's why it didn't fit any of the challenges, because I'd already started it before those two readathons started. But yeah, I read that one. It's another one in the Hercule Poirot series. Really enjoy it. And I think the only other book I didn't mention was I also finished the audiobook for Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince just before the end of the month. That one didn't fit any of the challenges, but yeah, I read it. I just continued on with this Harry Potter series after reading the other two audiobooks, and then I continued on with the last book, which I finished this month. But yeah, that is all the books that I read in September. This video was a little all over the place because of the readathons. This coming month it won't be as bad because I'm only doing 1 month-long readathon rather than 2. So yeah, that is all the books I read in the month of August. Let me know what your favourite book was from August. I think my favourite one was probably either I Am Change or the song Rising. I'll leave my review for I Am Change linked down below, as well as all the other books I reviewed that I mentioned in this video. So yeah, that is it for this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.